This is a strange story of a vampire who is a doctor and saves patients. He lost his parents and now he has only one mission to find those who are responsible for his parents' death. The take starts in a cemetery where Park Ji-sung goes to a grave and removes the dirt that had settled on it. The gravestone reads, "Don't search for death. Death will find you." He starts digging the grave, and underneath, he finds several skeletons, and it seems that these are skeletons of vampires. He returns to his camp in the town Kochania, where a war is ongoing. His fellow doctor advises him to leave soon as things are about to get worse. However, Ji-sung refuses because he has a critical surgery to perform on an injured girl. The soldier warns that the terrorists don't distinguish between civilians and soldiers, but Ji-sung insists they leave, and he will stay here and treat the child, and his fellow doctor wishes him luck before departing. In a small operation theater, Ji-sung swallows a green pill, which turns his eyes green, and he uses his special powers to remove the bullet from the girl's body. Meanwhile, the terrorists infiltrate the building, and Ji-sung knows they are coming, but he continues the surgery as quickly as possible. After finishing, Ji-sung carries the girl outside, only to be confronted by terrorists demanding his surrender. Ji-sung tries to reason with them, saying he is just a simple doctor and asks them to let him and the girl go. The terrorists don't listen and shoot him multiple times. He falls to the ground, seemingly dead. But as one of the terrorists approaches him, Ji-sung opens his eyes. His body transforms and he kills all the terrorists one by one, revealing that he is actually a vampire. Ji-sung is infected with a virus called VBT, which has been passed down through generations in his family, and has become a vampire. The virus prevents him from aging after a certain point, grants him unnatural strength and much more powers, but also makes him vulnerable to sunlight and gives him an intense thirst for blood. Ji-sung worked hard to become a specialist in hepatopancreatobiliary surgery, despite his condition. The next scene flashes back to his childhood in Moore Country, where baby Ji-sung's father is seen giving candy to a boy on Halloween. Later, two vampires attack Ji-sung's home and start fighting with his father. While one vampire tackles his father, the other heads to Ji-sung's room to kidnap him. However, the room only has a tape recorder playing music because Ji-sung's father had already warned his mother to take him away. During the fight, Ji-sung's father is injured, and the vampire leader, Lee Jae-wook, interrogates him about Ji-sung and his mother's whereabouts. When he refuses to tell, the vampires inject him with something and Ji-sung's father dies on the spot despite having vampire ability. Years later, Ji-sung is now 16 years old and lives alone with his mother. One day, Ji-sung is seen talking to an injured deer and promising to free it once it heals, but deep down, he knows he can never be free himself. Ji-sung's powers are still uncontrollable, which is why his mother keeps him isolated on an island. During breakfast, Ji-sung tells his mother he is going to town to get books, but she refuses. Frustrated, Ji-sung insists nothing will happen to him, and before leaving, his mother gives him a bottle of medicine to take. He pretends to take it, but throws it into the sea. At the bookstore, Ji-sung sees a woman get a paper cut, and the sight of blood nearly makes him lose control and transform into his vampire form. He manages to compose himself and rushes home. His mother, as usual, starts homeschooling him. Ji-sung angrily complains, saying that there is no point in studying when he will always be a vampire. His mother explains that education is crucial for him to live a normal life among humans and understand himself better to find a cure. Ji-sung storms off to his room, still in disbelief. Meanwhile, Ji-sung's mother continues her experiments in her lab, desperately searching for a cure to the VBT virus for the past 16 years, but with no success because she wants to give Ji-sung a normal human life. That night, Ji-sung breaks down in front of the dead deer crying because he drank its blood to quench his thirst. His mother also got very worried to see him suffer like that. The next day, Ji-sung, overwhelmed by his condition, tries to use his vampire powers to end his life in the forest, believing he will otherwise end up killing everyone around him and live forever. Despite his attempts, nothing works, and he finally jumps into the sea. When he wakes up, he is lying on the shore, still alive. Defeated, he heads home, only to get into a fight with a man who gets angry because Ji-sung wasn't moving off the road. In his rage, Ji-sung uses his supernatural strength to beat the man and his entire gang. They take him to the police station, but the police refuse to believe such a young boy could take them all down. At that moment, Ji-sung's mother arrives and takes him home, and scolds him harshly for his irresponsible behavior. Ji-sung cries, saying he wants to be human and can't live like this anymore. His mother, moved by his pain, also starts crying. Meanwhile, Jae-wook, the vampire who killed Ji-sung's father, has become a wealthy surgeon. He orders his henchmen to keep an eye on Ji-sung, believing he could be important to them. In the forest, a girl came to the forest with her family. She was separated from her family while chasing a rabbit. Jae-wook's henchmen hypnotized some wolves to attack her, But at the very moment, Ji-sung arrives just in time and fights with all of the wolves, scaring them away. He helps the girl, who only suffered a minor head injury and fainted. For the first time, Ji-sung doesn't feel the urge for blood even after looking at her injured head. When the girl wakes up, she asks if Ji-sung is a ghost, and he smiles, saying something like that. After the rescue officers arrive at the scene, Ji-sung disappears. The henchmen watching all of these are pleased because they were testing Ji-sung's control over his powers. Back home, Ji-sung tells his mother everything, and he is very happy that he saved a human life. His mother is proud and relieved to see him so happy. The henchmen report the incident to Jae-wook, who orders them to capture Ji-sung and kill his mother. The henchmen arrive at Ji-sung's home. His mother tries to inject one of them with something, but she is not strong enough. Meanwhile, Ji-sung buys a hair clip for his mother, and upon returning home, he smells the presence of unfamiliar vampires. He rushes inside and sees the henchmen inject his mother with something. Ji-sung fights them, but is easily defeated because they are much stronger. Injured, Ji-sung's mother tells him to close his eyes, and she turns on a bright light which weakens the henchman. Ji-sung grabs his mother and escapes, with the henchmen in pursuit. He manages to outsmart them and lays his mother down in a clearing. Crying, Ji-sung asks his mother who these people are and why they want to kill them. She tells him to stay away from them and asks him to take her home. Once home, Ji-sung's mother instructs him to burn the house down with her body inside to prevent anyone from finding it and using it to infect others. Ji-sung refuses at first, but agrees after his mother insists. Before setting the house on fire, his mother tells him to retrieve some recordings and documents hidden behind a painting. These contain all the information she gathered. Ji-sung puts the hair clip he bought on his mother, lights the house on fire, and watches it burn down. He is now completely heartbroken because his mother is gone and he has no family left. Fast forward, Park Ji-sung is now a brilliant and famous army doctor stationed in Chechnya. He reflects on his past, overwhelmed with grief. Suddenly, another battle erupts, and while treating an injured soldier, his best friend Ju Hyun-woo calls to inform him that the documents from the painting have led to information about Taemin Cancer Hospital. Ecstatic, Ji-sung tells his fellow doctor to let the soldier rest. As soon as his colleague leaves, Ji-sung is about to say something when a bomb explodes, shaking the entire building. Everyone thinks Ji-sung is dead, but come on, he is a vampire. So after getting injured, he rises again and leaves everyone, the doctor and the soldiers completely shocked. He leaves the scene and heads straight to Seoul, the capital of Korea, to meet his friend Hyun-woo. Hyun-woo tells him that these documents are from 3 years prior to Ji-sung's birth, which means they date back to 1976. He also mentions that around the same time, Ji-sung's parents were infected by the VBT virus, which turned them into vampires. Hyun-woo suggests that whoever created these documents probably knows about the virus and might even have a cure for it. Determined to become human again and to uncover what happened to his parents, Ji-sung decides to join Taemin Hospital. Now, Yu-ri-ta, who is a surgeon at Taemin Hospital, is quite something. She is super arrogant, stubborn, and completely full of herself. She doesn't care about anyone else. Just then, her resident tells her that she has been prohibited from performing the surgery she was about to do. Furious, Rita rushes to the conference meeting, but on her way, she bumps into Ji-sung, who just enters the hospital, and his glasses fall on the ground and break. Before Ji-sung can even say anything, Rita yells at him and storms off. Ji-sung meets with the hospital's vice president, Choi Kyung-in, and before joining, he puts forth 2 conditions. First, he won't eat with everyone in the cafeteria. And second, he needs a TV in his office. Kyung-in agrees to his demands. Meanwhile, in the conference room, Rita tries to convince all the doctors to let her perform the surgery, and she claims that she can handle it. However, Gerard Kim, another surgeon, refuses her by saying that the surgery is too complicated for her to handle, and they should opt for chemotherapy instead. Vice President Kyung-in and Ji-sung also arrive in the conference room. After listening to everyone, Ji-sung calmly says that neither of the proposed methods will save the patient. This catches Rita's attention, and she demands to know, "Who are you?" At that moment, Vice President Kyung-in introduces Ji-sung as the new chief surgeon of their team A. All the doctors were shocked because they had only heard of the famous Dr. Ji-sung until now. Ji-sung suggests that to save the patient's life, they must perform an Appleby surgery. Rita is quick to point out that it's a very complicated procedure. Ji-sung, with a slight smirk, tells her that maybe she is afraid because she has never performed such a surgery before. Rita, of course, gets angry and declares that she will be the one to complete the surgery because she trusts her skills entirely. Ji-sung agrees, but warns that if any complications arise during the surgery, Dr. Rita will be solely responsible. Saying this, Ji-sung turns to leave with his usual cold demeanor, But just as he's about to go, one of the lenses from his broken glasses falls out, causing him to get embarrassed in front of everyone. Despite this, he maintains his charm and heads to his office, where he stores some green pills in his locker. These pills help him control his bloodlust whenever he sees blood, allowing him to perform surgeries without carving for blood. Later, Ji-sung changes into his doctor's gown and goes to check on his patients. Senior Dr. Woo-il-nam visits Vice President Kyung-in in her office, complaining that after all these years of working at the hospital, he deserves the position of chief surgeon. Vice President Kyung-in calmly responds that Dr. Ji-sung is a very famous doctor, and it's a matter of pride that he wants to work at their hospital. She further adds that the decision to make Ji-sung the chief was made by both the chairman and the new director. This leaves Dr. Nam speechless. As Rita is talking to herself while heading to the surgery room, Ji-sung stops her and asks who gave her permission to perform the surgery. Just then, Dr. Nam arrives and tells Rita to go ahead with the surgery because he gave her the permission. In the observation room, everyone gathers to watch Rita perform the surgery. Suddenly, the hospital's chairman, Yoo Seok-ju, arrives. Before Dr. Nam can say anything, the chairman happily greets Dr. Ji-sung and praises him. Seeing this, Dr. Nam grows jealous of Ji-sung. Meanwhile, in the operating room, Rita briefly greets the chairman and begins the surgery. The chairman then suggests to Ji-sung that he should train Rita because she is an excellent doctor. However, Ji-sung declines. The chairman then mentions that Rita is his only niece, at which point Ji-sung stays silent and focuses on the surgery. Trying to show off how cool she is in front of Ji-sung, Rita starts chatting with the other doctors about yesterday's party, leaving everyone confused by her behavior. In her attempt to be cool, Rita ends up taking the surgery lightly, and soon the patient's vitals start to worsen, leading to internal bleeding. Panicking, she tries to fix the situation, but a splash of blood hits her face, scaring her to her core. At that exact moment, Ji-sung enters the operating room and orders her to leave. Stubborn as always, Rita refuses to go, but the chairman makes an announcement, telling her to leave the room. Furious, Rita storms out and screams at the top of her lungs. Ji-sung then announces that he will perform the Appleby surgery, leaving all the doctors stunned. They had only read about this surgery in books, and no one in the hospital had ever successfully performed it. Ji-sung asks everyone to focus and calmly performs the surgery, bringing the patient's vitals back to normal. Everyone claps for him, but Rita is still annoyed by the previous encounter and glares at him. As Ji-sung is leaving the theater, he gestures to Rita as if to say, "Did you get it now?" This leaves Rita absolutely fuming. In the cafeteria, Rita starts ranting about Ji-sung to her friend, Choi Soo-yoon, calling him grumpy and hard to deal with. But Soo-yoon disagrees, saying she doesn't think so because he recently performed a super complicated surgery and is actually quite handsome. She even asks Rita how old Ji-sung is, to which a frustrated Rita responds, "He's in his late 30s, and you can tell she is not liking Soo-yoon's admiration for him at all. Meanwhile, another doctor, who has a massive crush on Rita, awkwardly asks her out to a French restaurant. Rita, being the queen of cold replies, shuts him down without a second thought and walks off to check on her patient. There she finds Ji-sung already checking the patient's vitals. She demands the file, but Ji-sung, in full dramatic fashion, crumpled the paper and throws it in her face, then tells her to meet him in his office. In the office, Ji-sung reprimands her, saying her careless behavior in the operating room could have cost the patient's life. Rita, being her stubborn self, snaps back, saying the outcome would have been the same even if she had done the surgery, and Ji-sung can punish her however he likes because she doesn't care. Ji-sung lets her off with a warning this time and tells her to be more careful in the future. Then, with a touch of bitterness, he shows her his broken glasses, grumbling about how they were a limited edition pair from Zurich that he loved, and now, thanks to her, he has no time to go back and get another pair. Annoyed, Rita grabs the glasses and storms off. Back at home, Ji-sung's friend Hyun-woo informs him that Taemin's database has top-notch security, so he couldn't break it, but since Ji-sung is now the chief of Team A, he could easily sneak into the database. Ji-sung, ever ready for a challenge, agrees. That night, Hyun-woo gifts Ji-sung a love robot, hoping it will give advice to Mr. Grumpy, but Ji-sung, unimpressed, kicks both of them out of his room. Later, he watches an old recording from his mom, which is filled with happy childhood memories, but the mood quickly shifts when his mother warns him about certain vampires who misuse their powers for evil. She explains that it was these vampires who caused his parents to get infected with the VBT virus. She never told him their identities because if Ji-sung found out, he would go looking for them, which would be far too dangerous. Watching this, Ji-sung becomes deeply saddened again. Meanwhile, Jae-wook is sitting in a car with the hospital's chairman, as he is the new hospital director. As per his grand plan, he had Ji-sung made the head of Team A. Jae-wook also calls his henchman to Seoul. The next morning, Hyun-woo hands Ji-sung some green tablets before they head to the hospital. He knows about Ji-sung's true identity and created these pills to help him. Upon arriving at the hospital, Ji-sung runs into Ri-ta, who hands him a pair of glasses identical to the ones she broke, and jokes, "I found them at a street stall. Looks like you got ripped off in Zurich." Laughing at her own joke, she walks off, leaving Ji-sung mildly annoyed. Later in his office, Ji-sung tries to access the hospital's database, but the server is down, so he fails. Meanwhile, Ri-ta and Ji-sung are part of a panel selecting new doctors. One of the candidates, a girl named Min Ga-yeon, struggles with English. Because of this, Ri-ta bluntly rejects her. Ga-yeon gets emotional and reveals that her mother passed away in this hospital, so she feels a deep connection to it. However, Ri-ta remains unimpressed and tells her to leave. But Ji-sung steps in, saying he will take Ga-yeon onto his team, and tells the panel they shouldn't have a problem with it. Ignoring their objections, he walks out. Ga-yeon follows him, thanking him profusely, but Ji-sung warns her that while he lets her lie slide this time, if she lies again, she won't get another chance. Surprised, Ga-yeon asks why he hired her if he knew her story was fake. Ji-sung, in his usual aloof style, says he could tell from her tired eyes that she works really hard, which is why he gave her the chance. Hearing this, Ga-yeon is overjoyed. As Ji-sung walks through the hospital, he senses the presence of a vampire. Following the scent, he reaches the conference room where Jae-wook, the new director, is addressing everyone. Even in the room, Ji-sung can't quite figure out who it is. After the conference, Jae-wook introduces himself to Ji-sung, and since Ji-sung has no idea who he really is, he gives his own introduction in return. Jae-wook holds a meeting with the doctors, where Dr. Nam discusses the details of an upcoming surgery and says he will be the one performing it. But Jae-wook, in typical manipulative fashion, praises Ji-sung and suggests that he should perform the surgery instead. Ji-sung agrees. Later, an unknown person sneaks into Ji-sung's office and swaps out the green pills in his locker, which suppress his blood thrust. Ji-sung unknowingly takes one before heading to the operating room, unaware of the dangerous consequences that could follow. Everyone was seated in the observation room, eagerly ready to witness the surgery. Ji-sung enters the operating theater, and as soon as he makes the first incision, he can't control himself at the sight of blood. His eyes begin to turn green and his nails start to grow. Jae-wook, observing this spectacle, can't help but smile and asks Ji-sung what's going on. Ji-sung excuses himself for a moment, steps into his office and checks to confirm that the tablets had indeed been swapped out. Then it hits him and he remembers the tablet given to him by Hyun-woo. He pulls it out from his coat and takes it without a second thought. In the observation room, Dr. Nam announces he will perform the surgery, but Jae-wook quickly shuts him down. Ji-sung returns to the operation theater and casually mentions that he had a stomach ache, using that as his excuse to jump back into surgery. Jae-wook is taken aback by this because he knows that he was the one who ordered the tablets to be changed. While performing the surgery, Ji-sung suddenly finds himself flooded with memories of his his mother's memories, but he maintains his cool and completes the operation. As soon as he finishes, he bolts out of the operating room like he has just spotted a ghost. Everyone starts praising him for his work, but Jae-wook whispers to Ri-ta that if Ji-sung hadn't left in the middle of the surgery, he could have set a record. Ri-ta, being the voice of reason, responds that records don't matter. It's the way you handle the situation that counts. After Jae-wook leaves, Ri-ta begins to ponder why Jae-wook is so enamored with Ji-sung when he doesn't even know him that well. Once outside, Jae-wook praises Ji-sung and tells him that he can ask for help whenever he needs it. But Ji-sung confidently declares he doesn't need anyone's help and rushes to the terrace to call Hyun-woo, spilling all the beans. Hyun-woo suggests that someone must have swapped his tablet and instructs Ji-sung to bring the new one home for testing. After his chat with Hyun-woo, when Ji-sung heads downstairs, Ri-ta blocks his path and confronts him, revealing that she knows why he left during the surgery. She accuses him of having a panic attack instead of just a stomach ache, and she intends to figure it all out. So, naturally, she has already informed the hospital to monitor Ji-sung's mental and physical health. However, Ji-sung remains unfazed by this revelation and bluntly tells Ri-ta that she can do whatever she wants, but he doesn't appreciate people who interrupt him. Upon hearing this, Ri-ta steps aside with a bit of attitude, but Ji-sung can't resist throwing in a little jab about not liking people who wear cheap, stale perfume either. Ri-ta, clearly not in the mood for jokes, and she gets furious. Meanwhile, the vice president informs Jae-wook that Dr. Ji-sung has requested access to the hospital database, to which Jae-wook smirks and grants permission. probably plotting something in his mind. The chairman arrives at his niece Rita's house, but she is pretty miffed because she felt humiliated in front of everyone that day. The chairman tries to reason with her, reminding her that she knows the situation spiraled out of control, and if Ji-sung hadn't stepped in, she would have found herself in a real pickle. Hearing this, Rita falls silent but insists she still doesn't like Ji-sung. The chairman responds that with all the hospital responsibilities now resting on her shoulders, she must learn to deal with all types of people. Once home, Ji-sung hands over the tablets to Hyun-woo, who inspects them and says they look the same but have had their composition altered. After taking the tablet, Ji-sung feels his craving for blood spike, and Hyun-woo is relieved he took the one that he gave him right away. Otherwise, he might have gone totally off the rails. Hyun-woo warns him that the biggest problem now is that someone else knows about Ji-sung's vampire status. Ji-sung admits he had a hunch about a vampire in the hospital but couldn't pinpoint it. Hyun-woo advises him to always keep that tablet handy and stay vigilant. After the hospital, Jae-wook heads to his private lab, where a few human doctors, lured by the promise of cash, are conducting experiments on vampires. The head doctor walks in and reports that one vampire has gone completely out of control, prompting Jae-wook to order the same mysterious injection that finishes the vampire off and orders to close this lab. Meanwhile, Rita hits the pub with a friend and in a tipsy state starts bashing Ji-sung, ranting about him like a soap opera star. Suddenly, two men approach her, but in her drunken haze, she ends up spouting nonsense that sends them packing. Her friend just shakes her head, clearly regretting the decision to join her. Back at the hospital, Ji-sung checks the CCTV footage but can't see anything due to a glitch, because someone has already set all this up, huh? As Ji-sung strides toward his office, he notices a guy loitering by his door. Confronting him, Ji-sung discovers this fellow is the one he called to fix the lock, leading to a rather awkward apology from Ji-sung. In the cafeteria, Dr. Nam and Rita begin gossiping about Ji-sung, with Rita labeling him a coward for leaving mid-surgery. Little do they know, Ji-sung is eavesdropping and chimes in, saying that irresponsible people like them shouldn't be gossiping in the cafeteria instead of checking on patients. This leaves Rita momentarily speechless since she technically works under him. Ji-sung has a patient come to him, and he tells the patient that staying in the hospital isn't going to help, only racking up bills since time is running out. The patient breaks down, pleading for just a bit more time to be with their family, which tugs at Ji-sung's heartstrings, convincing him to admit the patient. Meanwhile, the chairman and vice president hold a meeting where Kyung-in mentions that the hospital needs some people for charity. When the chairman inquires about the new director, she reveals they have made some changes in the drug department but doesn't have all the details yet. The chairman nods, agreeing that what Jae-wook is doing is just fine. Suddenly, he starts feeling unwell, and the chairman tells the vice president that they're just feeling a bit exhausted and needs to step out for some fresh air. Chairman steps outside and takes medicine that improves his condition. Now the hospital is calling in 50 poor people for charity treatment, one of whom, Gongji Bok, is happily asking the reception about everything. Meanwhile, since Jae-wook has ordered the closure of his private lab, the head doctor leaves in disappointment, abandoning her fellow doctors. After her departure, Jae-wook's vampire henchmen enter the lab, and all the human doctors start staring at them, and as you can imagine, things are about to get worse. Jae-wook holds an emergency conference and announces that he has made some changes in the drug department, introducing the new head, Seo Hae-ri, who previously conducted vampire testing in Jae-wook's private lab. Dr. Kim raises his objections, claiming he won't work with a pharmaceutical company, and Ji-sung chimes in, joking that they should name the drug something like Rita, Pita, or Nita. In a huff, Rita shoots back at Ji-sung, knowing full well he did it just to annoy her. However, Jae-wook ultimately delivers his final decision. After exiting, Dr. Kim tells Ji-sung that they think alike and should work together, to which Ji-sung coldly denies him before walking away. One of the charity patients is a nun named Sylvia An. Rita insists she will personally take care of Sylvia, but the chairman interjects, saying that Dr. Ji-sung can treat Sylvia even better than she can, and reluctantly, Rita agrees. During the checkup, Rita asks Ji-sung to please treat Sylvia well, regardless of how he treats the other patients. With that said, she leaves and steps outside, lost in thoughts about the past, where Sylvia had looked after her parents' death, even naming her. In Jae-wook's office, he grants Ji-sung permission to enter the database for Taemin Hospital and shakes his hand. Yet Ji-sung remains oblivious to his vampire nature. When Ji-sung opens the database, he discovers that all information related to the document has been deleted just days ago. He becomes convinced that someone has deliberately summoned him there. Meanwhile, in the lab, a servant vampire takes fresh blood for research, inciting Jae-wook's wrath, who transforms into his vampire form to punish the servant, stating he won't let them ruin what he has built over 40 years. On the other hand, Ji-sung senses the presence of a vampire outside his house and sees someone watching him from the window. But when he goes outside, the vampire is gone. In the hospital, the vice president informs Rita that Dr. Ji-sung has recommended disciplinary action against her, sending her into a rage as she storms to confront Ji-sung at his home. However, at his home, she meets Hyun-woo instead, who tells her Ji-sung has just stepped out and she can wait here. After preparing the coffee, Hyun-woo's robot scans Rita's body, which he tries to stop. But just then, Ji-sung arrives and he asks Hyun-woo why he let this woman enter the house. Rita starts yelling at him, accusing him that he is using this tactic just to settle a personal score. Ji-sung retorts that he has no personal vendetta, he is merely teaching her as a senior doctor. As Rita attempts to leave, Ji-sung gets a strong sense of a vampire and asks Hyun-woo to confirm it. Ji-sung then warns Rita not to go out alone at night, offering to drive her to the hospital. Confused by Ji-sung's change in behavior, Rita insists on going alone, but he insists on accompanying her. Along the way, she complains incessantly, while Ji-sung remains focused on the vampire. After dropping Rita off at the hospital, he starts pursuing the vampire, leading them both away from the hospital to fight. They engage in an intense battle, but the vampire strikes Ji-sung's face with UV lights, weakening him. In a brutal twist, the other vampire injects him with the same serum that killed his parents. Summoning all his strength, Ji-sung manages to pull the injection out but struggles to get back on his feet. Meanwhile, Rita scolds Ga-yeon for her negligence, which is delaying a patient's recovery. Even when scolding her in private, Ga-yeon breaks down in tears. Outside, Rita sees Ji-sung collapse in the parking lot. She rushes over to find him unconscious, his body icy cold, with his heart racing abnormally fast. She quickly takes him to the hospital, where Ga-yeon joins her, but Rita shoos everyone else away. After a while, when she checks his fever again, she finds his body temperature so low that it shouldn't be possible for a living human. Rita wonders if the thermometer is broken, just as Ji-sung, in a daze, starts calling for his mother. Rita is shocked when she hears this, and just as she's about to draw Ji-sung's blood with a syringe, he suddenly wakes up and grabs her hand tightly. He then gets up to leave. Rita, following him, asks where he disappeared to after leaving the hospital and how he ended up unconscious. She even adds that she is now certain that Ji-sung is suffering from some illness and tells him that he can confide in her and she won't tell anyone. But Ji-sung, in a bad mood, scolds her and tells her to stop meddling in his life. He also tells her to stay put. As usual, Rita is left speechless. Meanwhile, Jae-wook is talking to his vampire servant and says that Ji-sung, after living among humans for so long, has forgotten that he is a vampire and doesn't even realize the full extent of his powers. Jae-wook plans to provoke Ji-sung through these methods and ultimately wants to recruit him so they can do something big together. The servant remarks that if Ji-sung finds out Jae-wook is the one responsible for his parents' death, he will become extremely violent. Jae-wook nonchalantly replies that when that happens, he will just send Ji-sung to his parents as well. Ji-sung reaches home in a poor condition and explains everything to Hyun-woo. Hyun-woo starts inspecting the syringe, and Ji-sung reassures him that he is fine. He just needs a little rest. Then the love robot starts playing a romantic song, which only intensifies Ji-sung's headache, making him want to smash the robot. Thankfully, Hyun-woo stops him. Rita at the hospital tries to figure out Ji-sung's illness by searching through all his symptoms, but she is unsuccessful. The next day, Hyun-woo tells Ji-sung that perhaps the people who killed his parents are involved in this too. Ji-sung insists that's impossible because he saw everything with his own eyes. Hyun-woo suggests that maybe they were working for someone else. Ji-sung coolly responds that it's a good thing because now he wants to catch them even faster. Hyun-woo hands Ji-sung some medicine bottles, calling them a gift. At the hospital, Jae-wook tells the chairman that he has prepared Ward 21 perfectly for the patients, where all the needy people will receive free treatment. The chairman is pleased to hear this. Ji-sung, checking the CCTV footage, tells the guard that he just wants to know who has been keeping an eye on him. Rita asks Soo-yoon if any person can survive at a body temperature of 27 degrees Celsius. Soo-yoon is curious and asks who she is talking about, but Rita, despite wanting to tell, can't. She then spots Ji-sung and starts following him, but Ji-sung quickly catches on. When he turns around, Rita pretends to be on the phone, only for her phone to actually ring at that moment. Ji-sung warns her to stop following him and to focus on her phone conversation. Embarrassed once again, Rita vents her frustration on her juniors. A while later, Rita sneaks into Ji-sung's office where he is sleeping. Just as she reaches out to check his temperature, Ji-sung wakes up. She tries to cover it up with a hand trick, asking if he can do the same. To her surprise, Ji-sung mimics her trick perfectly. Terrified, Rita rushes out, but Ji-sung blocks her path and tells her to stop following him. Rita confronts him, asking why he won't just explain how he ended up unconscious that day. Ji-sung sternly tells her not to poke her nose into his business and stay away. Rita, now frustrated, asks if Ji-sung thinks she is obsessed with him. Ji-sung coolly replies that's exactly what it looks like. Rita likes him, and with that, he walks away. Meanwhile, the trainees are complaining amongst themselves because they don't want to treat poor patients. Just then, Hye-ri enters and asks for the records of all the underprivileged patients. The vice president notices this since she has been suspicious of Hye-ri for not having any reports from the drug department. She asks Dr. Kim to keep an eye on Hye-ri, but Dr. Kim refuses, even after the vice president offers to approve his research proposal. At a conference meeting, Jae-wook tells all the doctors that Ward 21 is fully equipped, and that from tomorrow, they will begin treating all the underprivileged patients. The doctors are anything but happy, as none of them are keen on providing free treatment. Ji-sung visits the same cancer patient again, only to find Sylvia praying for him. He remains silent but later notices the patient has taken a painkiller. Annoyed, Ji-sung scolds the patient, which prompts the patient's wife to angrily lash out at him. But the patient manages to calm the situation down. Rita, furious, runs after Ji-sung, yelling that she thought she was the grumpiest person alive, but Ji-sung is even worse for treating a patient like that. Once again, Ji-sung tells Rita to stay away and walks off. Meanwhile, Ga-yeon is being bullied by her seniors. They were doing this because with the increase in the doctor's workload, she had called the director. Jae-wook shows up and says that he is also a doctor and goes to help the patient. After examining her, he finds that the lady's liver is infected, and if they don't do a liver transplant quickly, she could die. So the lady now becomes their top priority. In the emergency meeting, Jae-wook explains the situation about the liver patient and mentions that there is a top-notch liver surgeon among them. Liver specialist Dr. Lee assumes Jae-wook is talking about him, but Jae-wook suddenly mentions Dr. Ji-sung's name instead. Ji-sung agrees to the surgery. As soon as they step out, everyone starts cursing both Ji-sung and the director, because the director seems to be assigning all the surgeries to Ji-sung. Meanwhile, Rita confronts Ji-sung, asking why he agreed to perform the surgery. To this, Ji-sung flaunts his skills, saying, "Because I'm the best." Rita points out that the surgery is extremely complicated, and if anything goes wrong, not only will the patient suffer, but Ji-sung's career could also be at risk. Ji-sung, in his usual cool manner, tells Rita that if she is that concerned about him, she should assist in the surgery. Rita, slightly flustered, responds that she doesn't care about him at all. Just then, Jae-wook arrives and asks Ji-sung why he fainted earlier. Before Ji-sung can reply, Rita cheekily interjects, claiming that Dr. Ji-sung had one too many drinks and passed out. Hearing this, Jae-wook leaves, but Ji-sung is left confused as to why Rita is covering for him so much. In the hospital ward, the liver patient's son starts crying uncontrollably seeing his mother's condition. Ji-sung, trying to comfort the boy because seeing this boy, he thinks of his own childhood. Seeing this, Jae-wook remarks that he didn't think Ji-sung was capable of understanding a patient's emotions and he is happy to see him like that. Ji-sung brushes it off, saying that sometimes some of them need assurance. Meanwhile, the liver patient's condition worsens, but they receive a call from another hospital informing them that a liver is available. Ji-sung, relieved, tells Rita to take her team and bring the liver back, while he prepares for the surgery. Just as Rita is about to leave, Ji-sung joins her in the ambulance, claiming that the director has specifically asked him to help bring the liver as well. On the way, Ji-sung receives a mysterious message that reads, "You were the only one who survived." Perplexed, Ji-sung can't make sense of it. They reach the hospital, collect the liver, and are about to head back when Ji-sung gets a call from Hyun-woo. Hyun-woo tells him that the injection Ji-sung received earlier is the same one that caused his parents' death, but Ji-sung survived it. Ji-sung is left bewildered. At that moment, he spots the same two vampires who had attacked him earlier. Suddenly, it all starts to make sense. Someone is orchestrating all of this. Ji-sung tells Rita to go back with the liver, and that he will follow shortly, as he has some urgent matters to attend to. Rita protests, saying the surgery won't be possible without him, and she is not leaving without him. Ji-sung assures her he will arrive on time, and reluctantly, Rita leaves. Ji-sung then chases after the vampires, leaping off a building and transforming into his vampire form. A fight ensues. One of the vampires tries to use that blue light weapon on him again, but this time Ji-sung remains unaffected, thanks to the medicine Hyun-woo had given him, which now protects him from the light. As the fight intensifies, the police arrive, and the two vampires flee. Ji-sung, however, gets stuck there, unable to leave. Meanwhile, Rita keeps calling Ji-sung, but he is not picking up. Losing hope, she calls Jae-wook to take over the surgery. Hearing this, Jae-wook smiles wickedly because his plan has finally worked. Ji-sung is not going to make it to the surgery. Jae-wook smugly thinks to himself that Ji-sung didn't disappoint him. As he prepares to step into the operation theater, the door opens, and Ji-sung walks in. Seeing Ji-sung, not only Jae-wook but all the doctors are stunned. Jae-wook can't believe how Ji-sung managed to return. Turns out, Ji-sung had incapacitated the police officers and rushed back to the hospital. He begins the surgery and his skill impresses everyone. However, as soon as Ji-sung sees the blood, his condition starts to deteriorate, as he is still adjusting to his vampire transformation. Rita urges him to take a break, but Ji-sung refuses and calmly completes the surgery. Everyone claps for him again. Meanwhile, under the cover of darkness, Hye-ri sneaks into Ward 21 and injects some mysterious drug into a patient named Gong Ji-bok's IV. After the surgery, the liver patient's son thanks Ji-sung, who in turn tells him never to cry again. Jae-wook is now furious, confronts Ji-sung, saying that what happened was not good at all, hinting at something else. But Ji-sung apologizes, saying he was delayed due to an urgent matter. Jae-wook warns him that this was his last mistake, and if he makes such a huge error again, he won't be forgiven. After meeting with Jae-wook, Ji-jung goes to his office and starts thinking about the two vampires. Just then, Rita walks in and scolds him and asks him how he could be so careless and leave the surgery in the middle. Ji-jung replies that he had to attend to a personal matter and tells her not to interfere in his affairs, to which Rita makes a face and walks away. Meanwhile, Jae-wook instructs his servant to leave Ji-jung alone for a few days. The servant remarks that Ji-jung's eyes are just like his father's, to which Jae-wook responds, "Are you suggesting that Ji-jung will do the same thing to me that his father did? Let me remind you, Ji-jung is not the kid he once was. He is much stronger now." Later at home, Hyun-woo tells Ji-jung that he had received the same injection that killed his parents, but instead of harming him, it made him stronger. Hyun-woo is thrilled, but Ji-jung feels down, saying that this only means his chances of becoming human again are slimmer, as he is now the most powerful vampire. Hyun-woo goes quiet. Ji-jung, lost in his thoughts, and remembers a childhood incident when his skin burned in sunlight. In anger, he throws a sun painting off the wall and tells his mother that just like he drank fairy blood, he will start drinking human blood too. Then he breaks down crying. The next day, Rita is at home watching the news, where a report comes in about a man who has beaten 2 police officers and escaped, and the description fits Ji-jung perfectly. Hyun-woo, who is also watching with Ji-jung, jokes, "He fights like an action hero," to which Ji-jung gives him a sharp look. At the hospital, senior doctors criticize Ji-jung for being late to surgery. He walks into the meeting room where they are gossiping about him, but he just keeps calm with his eyes closed. Then, Vice President Kyung-in arrives and announces that from now on, they will be treating patients in Ward 21. Later, Ji-jung discusses liver surgery with his junior doctor, while Rita approaches from behind, comparing him to the man in the news. When Ga-yeon points this out, Ji-jung catches Rita in the act, but she pretends she was taking a picture. Meanwhile, senior doctors, including Dr. Nam, confront Director Jae-wook, saying they don't want to treat Ward 21 patients for free. Jae-wook replies that he thought Dr. Park Ji-young had already agreed to it, so the others would follow suit. Dr. Nam feels insulted because of Dr. Park. Rita again vents about Ji-sung to Soo-yoon, but Soo-yoon dismisses it, saying that Rita is just exhausted, which only makes Rita angrier as she storms off. Soo-yoon runs after her to calm her down, but on the way, Rita spots Ji-jung, which infuriates her even more. Ji-jung, clueless as ever, doesn't understand what's going on. After the meeting, Jae-wook starts reflecting on the past, recalling a time in the lab when he excitedly told his senior doctor that they had made a groundbreaking discovery of VBT virus and should use it to save people from death. But his senior doctor shut him down, accusing him of selfish motives. Enraged, Jae-wook transformed into his vampire form, snapped the senior doctor's neck and warned him not to get in his way, or else he would kill the other 2 doctors too if they didn't agree with him. Back in the present, Jae-wook realizes he can't delay his plans any longer, no matter the cost. At the inauguration of Ward 21, the patients are excited as treatment begins. Ji-jung sits with his cancer patient, who admits he knows he doesn't have much time left but wants to live a little longer for his daughter's birthday. The patient's daughter offers Ji-jung a juice, which makes him pause and think deeply. Elsewhere, the patient Sylvia confides in Rita, saying she knows she doesn't have much time left, which deeply saddens Rita, who tries to reassure her that she will recover soon. At that moment, Ji-jung enters and Rita expects him to reveal the truth. But instead, Ji-jung tells Sylvia she will be fine and will be discharged in a few days, much to Sylvia's relief and Rita's shock. Outside, Rita thanks Ji-jung for what he said, but Ji-jung brushes it off, saying he only did it because Rita had saved him from director Jae-wook the other day. Rita responds that she only did it out of pity for Ji-jung's condition. Ji-jung, clearly annoyed, asks if she really thinks he is sick. Rita, unfazed, replies, "Yes, I do. You are hiding something from everyone, and even though the symptoms are clear, I can't figure out what illness it is." And with that, she walks away. As soon as Rita goes to take the patient's blood sample, she sees that Hya-ri has already done it. Rita, in her typical rude fashion, asks Hya-ri who gave her the permission to do it. Hya-ri, being no less, snaps back saying that the director himself asked her to do it. And of course, this sparks a little argument between the two, which is when the vice president steps in and tells Hya-ri to apologize to Rita immediately. Hya-ri, after giving it some thought, reluctantly apologizes. While checking a patient in Ward 21, Ji-sung notices a bunch of needle marks on the arm of a patient named Gong Ji-bok. When asked who was responsible for this, the patient blames Hya-ri. Upon seeing this, Ji-sung tells Dr. Kim to investigate these side effects. Meanwhile, an alcoholic patient from the ward sneaks into the medicine room looking for alcohol. As soon as he spots a bottle of medical alcohol, he is about to drink it when Rita steps in just in time, snatching it from him. Later, during his rounds, Ji-sung's bloodlust flares up when he sees blood, and he starts transforming into his vampire form. The injection he received may have made him stronger, but now he can't control himself. He rushes back to his office, takes his green pills, and calms down a little. When he gets home, Ji-sung asks Hyun-woo to restart Project VTLC. Hyun-woo firmly refuses, reminding Ji-sung that they had discussed this before. If they go through with the project, sure, all the viruses will be removed from Ji-sung's body, but his cells will be destroyed, and he will only have 2 days to live. This emotional moment leaves Hyun-woo visibly shaken. Later in his room, Ji-sung stares at himself in the mirror for a long time. Then in a fit of rage, he breaks the mirror. The next morning, when Dr. Kim checks Gong Ji-bok's hand, the marks and allergies have mysteriously disappeared, leaving him baffled. Gong Ji-bok casually mentions that when he woke up in the morning, the marks were just gone. Dr. Kim reports this to Ji-sung, who is also puzzled by this sudden recovery. Meanwhile, Soo-yoon accidentally drops a patient's blood sample on the floor while in the lab, and seeing the blood, Ji-sung feels his cravings surge again. Dr. Kim notices Ji-sung's unease, and before he can fully transform into his vampire form, Ji-sung bolts out of the lab. At the reception, that same alcoholic patient starts demanding alcohol again, throwing things around. Security tries to stop him, but he injures himself in the chaos and blood starts pouring from his hand. The sight of blood makes Ji-sung even more lightheaded. Just as the patient is about to attack Rita, Ji-sung steps in and saves her, getting a wound on his cheek in the process. Security finally restrains the patient, but Ji-sung, in a daze, continues walking forward, blood dripping from his cheek onto his shirt. Rita follows him, only to witness something shocking. The cut on Ji-sung's cheek starts healing on its own, right before her eyes. Rita is completely stunned. When Ji-sung snaps back to his senses, he touches his cheek, but by then it's too late. He quickly covers his face and rushes to his office, where he looks in the mirror and sees that the wound has already healed. Outside, Rita keeps banging on his door because now she is suspicious. Ji-sung, with his hand still on his cheek, comes out and tells Rita to leave. Meanwhile, Jae-wook confronts Hya-ri in Ward 21, asking why she administered an injection to an alcoholic patient when she knew better. Hya-ri claims she had no idea about it, and Jae-wook lets her off with a warning, asking her to be more careful in the future. Back at home, Ji-sung tells Hyun-woo everything that's been happening, and Hyun-woo is confused as to why Ji-sung's blood cravings have increased to the point where even the green pills are not working. Ji-sung reveals that it all started after he got that injection. He asks Hyun-woo if there is any way to adjust the composition of the green pills, but Love Robot warns that doing so could lead to severe side effects, including depression. So they decide to drop the idea. Ji-sung then mentions that Rita might have seen his face healing, though he is not sure. That night, Ji-sung dreams that he is about to attack a woman singing in the hospital, but just before he does, he wakes up. It was all a dream. The next morning, as Ji-sung is heading to the hospital with a bandage on his cheek, Hyun-woo stops him and reminds him that Rita definitely saw his wound healing the day before. At the hospital, Rita keeps telling Soo-yoon that she saw Ji-sung's wound heal right before her eyes and is now questioning if Ji-sung is even human. Soo-yoon thinks Rita has lost her mind, obsessing over Dr. Ji-sung. But Rita is determined to get to the bottom of it and drags Soo-yoon along with her. When they meet Ji-sung, Rita seizes the moment and rips the bandage off his cheek, only to see stitches there. She is shocked, while Soo-yoon is terrified and quickly hands Ji-sung his bandage back, all while apologizing. Ji-sung is furious and tells Rita that he will recommend disciplinary action against her for accusing him of lying, and then storms off. After he leaves, Soo-yoon scolds Rita, saying that thanks to her, she got humiliated in front of Ji-sung, and now Dr. Park might never talk to her again. Meanwhile, Ji-sung smirks to himself as he leaves because Hyun-woo had cleverly put those stitches on his cheek, knowing that Rita would try to investigate. After leaving from there, Ji-sung heads straight to the lab and starts questioning Dr. Kim about that particular patient. Dr. Kim tells him that something strange is happening not just with that patient, but with all the patients in the ward. Blood samples are taken from all of them, but instead of going to the lab, they are being sent to the drug department. Dr. Kim suggests that if Ji-sung helps him, the two of them could figure out what's really going on. But since Ji-sung has been losing control every time he sees blood, he flatly refuses. Meanwhile, Jae-wook assigns Dr. Nam the responsibility of Ward 21, tells him that if he plays his cards right, he could become the director of the hospital one day. Enticed by the lure of money and fame, Dr. Nam agrees to follow Jae-wook's every order without a second thought. While getting coffee from the vending machine, Ji-sung finds it isn't dispensing properly. In a fit of frustration, he starts punching the machine. Ga-yeon happens to see this and thinks to herself, wow, Dr. Park must be under a lot of stress. At the hospital, Rita notices that the alcoholic patient is being kicked out and tries to stop it, saying his treatment isn't complete. But Dr. Nam steps in and explains that it's on Jae-wook's orders, and if this patient stays, the hospital could suffer significant losses. Reluctantly, Rita lets the patient go but feels awful about it. She is still down in the dumps when she gets home, but her mood lifts when the vice president comes over for dinner. Later, that very patient is seen sitting comfortably, drinking away, when suddenly Jae-wook's henchman, vampire Ji-hyun, shows up and throws him in front of a car. Back home, Hyun-woo tells Ji-sung that unless he gets his hands on better pills and learns to control himself, he shouldn't perform any surgeries. Ji-sung agrees. Hyun-woo also says they aren't making any progress with the painting's document details, so it might be time for them to return to Kochenia and resume work on Project VTLC. Hearing this, Ji-sung gets lost in thought. In a meeting room full of doctors, Dr. Nam asks Dr. Park handles the surgery, but Park Ji-sung refuses, saying he has to attend a seminar on Jeju Island. At the same time, Rita notices Ji-sung's trembling hands. Dr. Nam asks Rita to take on the surgery, but she refuses too. So Dr. Nam, albeit hesitantly, agrees to do it himself. Later, when Rita passes the vending machine, she figures out that it was Ji-sung who caused the chaos earlier. She storms into his office and declares that she is going with him to the Jeju seminar. Before Ji-sung can even protest, she walks out, leaving him with a smile on his face. At the seminar, Rita tells Ji-sung not to worry if no one recognizes him. But the moment they arrive, everyone treats Ji-sung like a celebrity, while no one knows who Rita is. This makes her burn with jealousy. During the seminar, Ji-sung impressively explains the intricacies of an Appleby surgery, which earns him even more attention, further fanning the flames of Rita's jealousy. Meanwhile, Jae-wook stares at a photo of a girl on his desk, reminiscing about the time they spent together at the hospital while she battled cancer. One day, that girl committed suicide because she was an orphan and had no one was there to pay her hospital bills. The memory of her death shattered Jae-wook, and even in the present, thinking about it brings him to tears. Outside the hotel, Ji-sung spots Rita and she tells him she is busy today. Ji-sung responds that he is also going to watch a dolphin show, and Rita, saying she is off to have breakfast, tells him to enjoy himself before walking into the dense forest. As she walks deeper into the woods, she feels like someone's following her. She turns around terrified and collapses to the ground in fear, only to see Ji-sung standing behind her. He asks, "Rita, what are you doing here?" To which she snaps back, "What are you doing here? Is the dolphin show happening in the forest or something?" Ji-sung asks again, but this time she falls silent and the two start walking together. Rita tells him that many years ago she came to this forest with her parents and a boy saved her from a pack of wolves. Ji-sung is stunned because Rita was the same girl and first human he ever saved, but he never imagined he would meet her again. He smiles to himself but doesn't tell her any of this. Later, at a party with all the doctors, everyone is drinking, but Ji-sung only pretends to drink. They start playing a game and Rita keeps losing, forcing her to take shot after shot. Eventually, one of the doctors suggests that Ji-sung should drink in her place, but he refuses, claiming he is allergic to alcohol. Hearing this, Rita is both hurt and angry, so she starts drinking the shots herself.